Welcome to this tutorial on requirement management and the requirement definition in Rommana. This is what you see in front of you is the project management panel when you open any project that you have already created. I'm going to go straight now to requirements on the top menu here, because that is when you work with requirement definition. Now, when Rommana is shipped or delivered or installed in the beginning, you always find these two categories: functional requirements, quality requirements. Assuming that at the very least in every project you have, you must have at least these two categories. You can always add new categories such as business requirements, hardware requirements, system requirements, marketing requirements, whatever you wish. And you can do this later on. We'll do it in a different tutorial, and we'll do it from the project menu here. But for now, let me click on functional requirement, because I am going to define my first functional requirement here in Rommana. You can see here, this says functional, and this is the definition of what functional requirements are all about. This is read only, you cannot change it. So I'm going now to add my first requirement under functional requirements. So it's kind of adding a child of functional requirements. When you click on that, you get to the requirement screen. When you see the requirement screen, it's you'll see that you need to select a priority for this requirement. I'll just select critical or whatever. Those, by the way, those are customizable. Those values are customizable again from the project menu here. We will do this in a different tutorial. But for now, these are the 4 possible values we have. I'm going to say this is my first requirement. Okay, and you can provide definition here, and of course you can key in your definition as you wish, and you can use some formatting. As you can see, this is the definition of this requirement. But also the definition could be imported from a Word document. If you go here and look at the source type, this is the source of the requirement. Again, it's a drop-down list, and it is also customizable. It is also customizable under the project management screen, under the project management options here. It can be almost any of these, and it could be anything else you add. But if I were to click here later on in a different tutorial, we will show how you can import the definition of a requirement from a Word document. In fact, when we do that, you'll see we can import one definition at a time, or we can import hundreds and hundreds of requirements from one Word document or multiple Word documents. So we will do this under a different tutorial titled Importing Requirements from Word documents. And we can also import hundreds of requirements from from an Excel spreadsheet, and we will do this on a different tutorial as well. The only fields that are left here are the release where this requirement is planned, and the iteration with that release. The iteration is when you're doing an agile project. Now, by default, as you can see, it's both TBD because we don't know which release. Now, you can start defining the first release here, and again, the release we have is 1.1 here. That's actually defined in the project level. We will do another tutorial about how you can create a new release under the project menu, or you can leave it TBD. If you put that like that, then you can go and say, okay, which iteration within that? You really have to specify the iteration, otherwise it will remain TBD. So by default, you have only one iteration in any project, or one sprint, if you will. But you can also add as many as you want within, but all that's done in the project management screen. Now, by default, when you create a requirement for the first time, it's a requirement it's a version 1. Of course, you can change requirement over time. By changing requirements, you can create a new version of the same requirement. That's called requirement versioning, and we will handle requirement versioning in a different tutorial. You can put here the person, the customer, the business analyst, the client who requested requested that requirement. It is not a drop-down list because we don't know who could possibly request that. So now we added all the fields that we need. By the way, this is if there is any related requirements. By the way, okay. This is any related requirements. If I think this requirement is related to any other requirement, we will do that. However, because we don't have any other requirement defined, then we will leave this for now. Again, this field up here, the description of the source. Right now, the source is a meeting. You can change it to anything, but here you can specify the date of the meeting. By default, the date is today, the day I created the requirement. But you can say this meeting was last week. All right, whatever. Okay. All right, I got a warning here that says the selected date cannot be later than the project predicted end date. When I created that project, I said this project is going to be ending in September 23rd, 2011. So that's why it tells me that you really cannot say you're going to be sending it after this requirement, you got to be after the end of the project. But remember, I mean, Rommana does a lot of validation like that to protect you from making mistakes. You can change that date, and then let me save here. You can, of course, do spelling checker by request. By default, it does not do it. If I save, it's going to save the requirement as it is. So, or I can do check spelling here to make sure that I did not make any typing mistakes or something. All right, and it runs the spelling checker. It comes with some recommendation, if any, and it didn't find anything. And now I can save my requirement. Okay, I'm saving my requirement now. Of course, when we save the requirement now, it becomes in the database. This is the only time the requirement goes to the database. We're going to start seeing the requirement screen, and we're going to see much more stuff in the requirement screen. All right. Now we need to look at these different fields and different areas of the requirement. We're going to review them very quick and we get back to those. All right, but let me review it very quick here, and then later on we can take one of them at a time and work on. Once a requirement is defined, as you can see, now you start to seeing a lot of things that are connected to the requirement. The first thing you see is how you get this requirement reviewed. And how you get other things associated with the requirement to be reviewed. For example, here you can see review this requirement with scenarios, which is of course disabled at this point because we have not defined any scenarios for that requirement yet. You can also see how a person can start looking at review comments made by others and can post a review comment about this requirement. If you go down here, you see a number of other things that will be added to the requirements. Here is how you can define use cases for that requirement, which will be addressed in a different tutorial. Here is how you can add scenarios to a requirement, and scenarios in Rommana are used to add more details and more elaboration and more precision to the requirement. And scenarios also will be used as a basis for writing the test cases later on. So as you can see, we don't attach test cases to a requirement directly, because test cases always have to be attached to either what we call a non-use case scenario or a use case scenario, which would be under use cases. So when you define a use case, you can define scenarios under that, and that's how we define your test cases. Going on the left here, you have models and related documents. Here is how you can attach additional models, if it is like decision tree, decision table, state model, a data model, user interface model, and we'll do this in a different tutorial. And you can also define documents that may be related to that requirement, whatever the document in nature is. Anything that you want people to read in association to this requirement. It may not be, it might be really different from the document that you might have used to import this requirement, because we said we can import the requirement definition from a document, and that will happen later on, but you can still attach some models or some documents that you want people to read. For example, if you have a screen design, or if you have any design document that's related to this requirement, will be attached here. If you scroll down further, we have 5 more boxes here. Tasks, risks, and actions are project management entities, because you probably Rommana also supports project management, so you can attach tasks and risks and actions to a requirement. Now, change requests and versions have to do with versioning of a requirement and change control or change management, and that's when you change a requirement. As long as the status of the requirement, you can put the requirement any way you want. By the way, we did not talk about the status. Right now it's backlogged because we have not decided yet, but you can certainly change the requirement to be under negotiation or anything else, and those as always customizable from the project management screen. So I'm going to change this to under negotiation, and you can, based on that, you can go back and make any changes to the requirement here based on reviews done by people and comments provided, until you change the status of the requirement to baseline or implemented. Then you cannot really change it anymore. You can attach a change request to it, and when you attach a change request, you would create a new version of the requirement. So versions would be, or a new version of the requirement would be created if we have submitted change request and we link it to this requirement. So change request is really the mechanism by which you create a new version of the requirement. Just a quick overview of the user interface here. In Rommana, on the user interface, you can always, if you're looking at an object on the top here, like this, in this case, we are looking at requirements or a requirement. At the bottom here, you see all the kind of things you can possibly define for a requirement. And we, as you can see, I can define a use case, I can define a non-use case scenario, or tasks, or actions, or risks, and I can also define them here. I mean, I can click here and add a use case, or I can click here and add a use case. The difference here, if I click here, I get to a screen to define one use case. If I click here, I get to a screen that has a list of all the use cases associated with that requirement. If I go to here, for example, non-use case scenarios, if I click here, I get to a screen where I can define a new scenario for this requirement. However, if I click here on the left, I get to a screen that has a list of all non-use case scenarios defined for this requirement. And I can still attach or add a new scenario from there. It's just a different way of looking at it.